I woke up to the taste of blood and dust in my mouth, my head pounding like someone had taken a hammer to it. The last thing I remembered was the parking garage under my apartment in Phoenix, headlights blinding me, rough hands slamming me against my truck, and a black bag over my face. Now I was here. In hell. The room was barely bigger than a goddamn coffin. 8 by 8 feet of pure misery. Stone walls that felt like they'd been carved out of an old frontier prison, a filthy concrete floor, and a heavy iron door with thick bars that looked like they could stop a freight train. High up on the back wall, about 12 feet up, was a narrow slit of a window, no wider than my forearm, with iron bars so tight even a cat would think twice. If that window didn't have bars, it still wouldn't have mattered. I'm 6'1", solid from years of boxing at the gym, and running from bad decisions. No way I was squeezing through that. But the sunlight that crept in during the day gave me a sliver of sky, a cruel reminder that the world outside still existed while I rotted in here. I'd been locked in this tomb for 3 days. No lights. No real food. Just a plastic bucket in the corner for a toilet that I flushed by pouring water from another bucket. The smell had become part of me now. I hated how quickly a man can get used to hell. The hallway outside stayed dim even during daylight. At night, they left a kerosene lantern burning somewhere down the corridor, casting flickering orange shadows that danced like devils across the walls. I had spent hours pacing every inch of this cell, memorizing the cracks in the floor, the loose stones, the rusted metal bed frame in the corner that had no mattress. I was looking for anything I could use as a weapon. 3 days ago they'd thrown me into a black van after jumping me. I'd been investigating the disappearance of my friend Marcus, a small-time hacker who'd gotten too deep into something involving the Russo family, the same crime syndicate that ran half the underground gambling and fentanyl pipelines through Arizona and New Mexico. I thought I was being careful. I was wrong. The drive had taken hours through empty desert roads. No other cars. Just dust and silence. When they finally pulled the hood off, I was standing in the courtyard of an old abandoned Spanish-style hacienda-turned-fortress, miles from anywhere. Crumbling adobe walls, collapsed sections of the main building, and enough armed men to make a SWAT team nervous. The one they called Vic had been waiting for me. Tall bastard, maybe 6'4", with a scarred face and cold black eyes. He wore a faded denim shirt, dirty jeans, and carried himself like a man who enjoyed breaking people. His partner Marco was shorter but built like a bull, thick neck and arms covered in tattoos. Both carried guns like they were extensions of their hands. Vic had smiled at me like we were old friends. "Jack Harlan. You should have stayed in your lane, reporter boy." Then he'd beaten me unconscious. I came to in this cell. Every morning since, they'd slide food under the door, stale tortillas and beans, and disappear. I knew they were watching. I could feel their eyes on me even when I couldn't see them. But today something felt different. I pressed my face against the cold bars of the door, listening. Footsteps. 2 sets. I backed up to the wall, hard hammering. The heavy lock rattled, and the door creaked open. Vic stood there with a rifle pointed at my chest. Marco carried a bucket of fresh water and a plate of food. His eyes flicked around the cell like he expected me to try something stupid. "Back up, Harlan," Vic growled. I raised my hands slowly and moved to the far wall. Marco stepped inside and set the bucket down. As he turned to leave, I noticed something. His holster was unsnapped. Careless. He bent over to place the plate on the floor. This was it. My pulse roared in my ears. Now or never. I lunged. My shoulder slammed into Marco's back, driving him face first into the stone wall. He grunted in surprise. I grabbed for his gun. My fingers closed around the grip just as Vic roared and fired a warning shot that ricocheted off the ceiling, spraying dust everywhere. Marco twisted like a wild animal and elbowed me hard in the ribs. Pain exploded through my side, but I didn't let go. We crashed to the floor, fighting for the weapon. I heard Vic charging in. Then the world went white with pain as something heavy cracked across the back of my skull. I woke up again later. How much later? I don't know, chained to the wall by one wrist. My head throbbed worse than before. Blood trickled down my neck. Vic stood over me, breathing hard, his face twisted with rage. "You just made the biggest mistake of your short life, Harlan," he said quietly. "We were gonna keep you alive long enough to get what we needed. Now I get to have fun with you." He crouched down so his face was inches from mine. "You think you know what this is about? You don't know shit. Marcus wasn't just some hacker. He was working for us. Until he tried to flip. And you're the loose end." My stomach dropped. Marcus had been playing both sides? Vic stood up and kicked me in the stomach for good measure. "Enjoy your last night breathing free air. Tomorrow we take you out to the desert and put a bullet in that smart head of yours." He slammed the door shut. The lock clicked like a death sentence. I sat there in the dark, chained, bleeding, and reeling from the betrayal. My best friend had sold me out before he disappeared. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the rage burning in my chest. But as the hours crawled by and the desert night grew cold, I noticed something. The chain around my wrist was old. Rusted. And the bolt holding it to the wall, it moved slightly when I pulled. A small, dangerous smile crept across my swollen lips. They thought they'd broken me. They were wrong. I started working on that bolt, twisting and pulling with everything I had left. Hours passed. My fingers bled. The lantern light in the hallway flickered lower. Then I heard it, voices. Vic and Marco arguing. Something about a phone call. Someone higher up. A name I recognized, Elena Voss. The real power behind the Russo family. The woman who supposedly never got her hands dirty. They were coming back. I yanked harder. The bolt gave an inch. Then two. The footsteps got closer. My heart slammed against my ribs as the lock on the door started to turn.
The door flew open. Vic stormed in first, rifle ready. Marco followed, still favoring his side from our earlier fight. I stayed slumped against the wall, pretending to be half dead. The chain was loose enough now. One good pull and I'd be free. "You hear that, Harlan?" Vic sneered. "Boss lady wants you alive after all. Says you might know more than you're telling. So lucky you, we're taking a little road trip." He stepped closer to unlock the chain. That was his mistake. The second his fingers touched the lock, I exploded upward. The chain whipped across his face like a metal lash, splitting his cheek open. He screamed. I ripped the rifle from his hands and drove my knee into his groin. Marco roared and charged. I swung the rifle like a baseball bat. The stock cracked against his jaw with a sickening sound. He dropped hard. For a moment, silence. Just my ragged breathing and the two men groaning on the floor. I took their guns, their knives, and the keys. My hands shook as I stepped over them. Freedom tasted like blood and dust. I crept down the dark hallway of the decaying hacienda. Old paintings hung crooked on the walls. Bullet holes pocked some of the plaster. This place had seen violence long before me. Outside, the desert night was freezing. Two black SUVs sat in the courtyard. I picked the one with keys in the ignition and climbed in. But as I turned the key, headlights suddenly flooded the courtyard. Another vehicle was coming fast down the dirt road. I ducked low. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up. A woman stepped out, tall, elegant, dressed in a dark coat that cost more than my truck. Elena Voss. She looked like a CEO who moonlighted as a crime queen. She walked straight toward the building like she owned the desert itself. I had seconds. I floored the SUV and smashed through the old wooden gate, tires spitting gravel. Gunfire erupted behind me. Bullets punched through the rear window. The chase was on. I drove like a madman through the desert, no lights, following the faint dirt track. The Mercedes and another SUV pursued, their high beams cutting through the night like knives. My mirrors exploded in shards of glass. I knew these back roads better than most. I'd grown up running them as a kid. I took a sharp turn into a dry wash, bouncing violently over rocks. One of the pursuing vehicles wasn't so lucky. It flipped spectacularly in my rear view. But Elena's Mercedes kept coming. She was relentless. My SUV started smoking. Engine damage. I had maybe 5 more minutes. I spotted an old abandoned mine entrance up ahead, the kind tourists never find. I killed the engine, grabbed the rifle, and ran inside, disappearing into the darkness. Footsteps echoed behind me soon after. "Come out, Jack," Elena's voice called, calm and cultured. "We can still make a deal. Your friend Marcus made one. He lived for a while. Betrayal burned fresh." I gripped the rifle tighter. I moved deeper into the mine, using the darkness. When she rounded a corner, I stepped out and pressed the barrel against the back of her head. "Drop it," I growled. She laughed softly. "You're better than I expected. But you still don't understand." She turned slowly. In the dim light from her flashlight, her eyes were ice cold. "Marcus didn't betray you, Jack. He was trying to protect you. He found out I was planning to take over the entire Southwest pipeline. He was going to expose me, so I had Vic kill him. Then we used his phone to lure you in. You were never the investigator. You were the bait." My world tilted. All of it a setup. Rage gave me strength. I slammed the butt of the rifle into her stomach. She doubled over, but still smiled. Then Vic's voice came from behind me. "Nice story time." He'd recovered faster than I thought. Blood streamed down his face, but he had a gun on me. 2 against 1. Again. I dove sideways as they opened fire. Bullets sparked off the rock walls. I fired back, hitting Vic in the shoulder. He dropped. Elena raised her own pistol. For a second, our eyes locked. Then I pulled the trigger first. The shot echoed through the mine like thunder. She fell. Silence. I stood there shaking, covered in dirt and blood, staring at the bodies of the people who had destroyed my life. But as I turned to leave, I heard a phone ringing in Elena's coat. I picked it up. A calm male voice answered. "Elena? Is it done?" I didn't recognize the voice, but I knew the tone. This wasn't over. The Russo family had a bigger boss, someone even Elena answered to. I hung up and smashed the phone. Limping out of the mine into the cold desert dawn, I looked at the rising sun. My body was broken. My best friend was dead. I had killed people tonight, but I was alive, and now I was the hunter. I climbed into Elena's Mercedes and drove west, toward the city lights barely visible on the horizon. They thought they could bury me in the desert. They should have made sure I stayed dead.